Ned Hanlon is determined to become the fastest man on water. Nicolas Cage is the boy in blue, the true story of a legend who left history in his wake.
The Boy in Blue was one of Nicolas Cage's earliest starring roles. It was a year before Raising Arizona and 2 years before Vampire's Kiss. It's a light, simple biofilm. This was before Cage started exploring his inner Cage. Nick plays Ned Hanlon, a famous Canadian rowing champion in the late 19th century. The film was directed by Charles Jarrett, who unfortunately passed away in 2011. Fortunately, we can now take a look back with writer Douglas Bowie. Here's the story of The Boy in Blue. Writer Douglas Bowie.
Well, I can't really take credit for the initial idea. There was a producer director in Canada named John Trent who somehow got a deal to do 3 features, all historical, all featuring sort of sporting themes and historic sporting heroes, but based on real stories. And he had heard about me, and I had a bit of a reputation by that point, and had offered me one of these. And I don't know what happened to the other 2. I don't think they ever, maybe they got written. They certainly never got produced. But mine sort of, the idea I was given was about a character named Ned Hanlon, who became a great sporting hero in Canada way back. We're talking in like the 1880s or so. This film, we're set back in the 1880s, 1890s, and back, it seems a bit odd now. I mean, rowing now is sort of a niche sport. It might come to your attention once every 4 years in the Olympics or something. But back then, I mean, we're talking in the days. There was no NFL, there was no NHL, there was no NBA. I don't think, basketball hadn't even been invented, which was invented by a Canadian, but it just hadn't even been invented at that stage. And rowing was a huge spectator sport. It's hard to understand now because it just isn't now. But it was a big spectator sport and a big betting sport. I think that's maybe part of its secret, but so they'd had these huge regattas, not just in Canada. It was very big around Toronto, but there were huge regattas in Boston and in Philadelphia and various rowing centers, and in England too, of course. So it's hard to sort of fathom it now that thousands of people would turn out to cheer on these rowers. And I think that the betting may have been a large aspect, a large source of its popularity. But Ned Hanlon in his day became, well, he was the biggest sporting hero certainly in Canada, but he's extremely well known internationally too. I mean, he was as big as, well, to use a Canadian reference, as big as Wayne Gretzky became later, or somebody, any big sports star now. I mean, everybody knew who he was. And after he was finished, and after the film was over, he actually was elected mayor of Toronto because he was so popular. But so to say that rowing is more, I don't think it's more Canadian than it is American than it is anything. I just think it was big everywhere back then, and it just now it's not in Canada or the States, or I think the Oxford-Cambridge boat race is still a big deal and that kind of thing, but it's not that it's still popular in Canada and not in the States. I think it's pretty much, no one pays that much attention to it here anymore, but back then certainly everybody paid attention to it. Who I didn't know anything about, but I did a bunch of research and wrote the script based. There was a lot missing, but based loosely on the life of this real character. And anyway, it sort of caught people's eye. I think it was a pretty good script at the time. And John started shopping it around and took it down. He went down to L.A. and shopped it around some of the studios. and 20th Century Fox picked it up. But then right at that time, I think he just had sort of got the news that Fox was interested in it, and he was killed in a car crash. I remember getting the news, got a phone call about this from somebody I didn't know terribly well, that he was just driving. He lived north of Toronto and just had a head-on collision and was killed in the prime of his career. So I thought that would be the end of the project, probably, because he was the driving force behind it. And if you actually look at the film, there is still a credit there based on an idea by John Trent. But so nothing happened for quite a while. But Fox had picked it up and continued to be interested in it, and pursued it, and had me just do some, got me out there and had script meetings with some other directors that got interested in it at the time, and it went through 2 or 3 other directors, actually, various rewrites. It's sort of a standard Hollywood story of rewrites. The only difference is I didn't get, sometimes in those stories, the original writer gets bumped and replaced, and, the thing's rewritten 6 times by other people. In this case, it was rewritten a few times, but they never, I kept the job, and I ended up with the sole credit on it. And so they eventually hired Charles Jarrett, and got Nicolas Cage and a pretty good cast, and eventually it was produced. So it was a long and kind of with this tragic death of John Trent was kind of lurking behind it, but it did eventually get made, which, and as you know, not every script gets produced, so it somehow made its way through the system. So I was heavily involved until the script was finalized, and then I did visit the set several times, and just was there. But by that point, there were still a few little fiddles done on the script and so on. But I was more or less done. So I was just sort of a glorified spectator on the set when I would drop by. So I was well aware of what was going on, but I wasn't really involved. And then when it was finished, I was invited to look at a rough cut and made some suggestions and so on and so forth. But my 98% of my involvement was really done. It was a pretty elaborate production, and all these sets and costumes and extras and big scenes, and it's exciting to see that it's coming to pass, because, as you know, lots of projects you work on never get to that stage. So I appreciated the fact that it was being produced, but they were more, as I say, just sort of, I wasn't really doing any work anymore, so I'd occasionally make a little suggestion or something like, well, how about this or how about that, but pretty minor. So they were more just out of interest, really. But there was no, I was always welcome. It's not like now you're the writer, you get lost. They were always, come whenever you like, and so on and so forth. And I got to know Nick Cage a bit, and he was very friendly. He was just at the beginning of his career then. People didn't really know who he was, but he was starting to get some heat on him, and he wasn't a movie star yet, but he had the feeling that he was going to become one fairly soon. But he was always very, I would chat with him. He was always very, not going to pretend we were close buddies, but, he was always very sort of a modest, friendly guy, and it was in that sense it was a positive experience. No, I remember the first time I spoke to him. Yeah, because he didn't. I was just on set, and he just walked by, and I just called to him and introduced myself, and he was right at the beginning of the shoot, and he was very gracious and very friendly, and he was excited because we hired a special. He didn't know anything about. I should say, for people who haven't seen the film, the subject of the film is rowing, which maybe we could talk about that a little bit, because it seems like a sort of odd topic maybe for a film. But so he didn't know anything about rowing, so they had hired a special trainer to take him out on the water. This was in Montreal at that point. They shot all over the place, but at that point it was in Montreal. and there's a canal there where he would practice his rowing. So he was talking to me mostly about rowing. Oh, I'm going this. I got to meet so and so, my rowing coach, and I really got into this rowing, and I think I'll keep after we finish this film. I'm going to take up rowing as a hobby. I don't think he ever did, but that's mostly what he was just sort of excited about the learning this new skill sort of thing. And it's tricky. I mean, those if you've seen the film, those racing shells are very tippy and narrow things, and a certain amount of abilities required just to get in one of those things without falling out. So anyway, he became quite good at it, I think, and looks in the film looks like somebody who knows what he's doing. But a lot of time was spent with him when he wasn't shooting on a day or had some time off. They'd immediately get him out to work on his rowing. So that's what he seemed excited to talk about. Got the poster in front of me here, and exactly, he looks like a bodybuilder in the thing. Yeah, I've got that picture in front of me, and it's I don't actually even remember that from the film, that shot, but although there were a bunch of workout training scenes in the montage and stuff in the film, but this one, maybe it's in the lighting and and he looks drenched in sweat. Maybe it's slightly exaggerated, but certainly there's no doubt that he was in fabulous shape for the film. There's no doubt about that. Now, whether he was like that anyway or whether he got like that for the film, I simply don't know. But he was very keen on doing the film. There's no doubt about that. He wasn't difficult to work with at that point. Maybe he became more so a little bit later, but I'd have to check, or you could have. This was, again, early in his career, and I don't know whether I wasn't privy to any private meetings he might have had with the director or whatever, but I don't remember him being difficult at all. I remember him being friendly and cooperative and not sort of having any airs of a movie star or anything. And I don't remember him questioning anything in the script. To me, he may have. There were a bunch of changes. As I said, there was an elaborate sort of rewriting process, but I don't think he'd been hired at that point. So I don't think some of those changes necessarily came from him. So the short answer is I don't know, but I think he was at the time pretty happy with it all, and not if he had developed a reputation for being difficult to work with, which I'm not saying he did, but I certainly don't think it was in evidence on the Boy in Blue.